Welcome to Bunch. I'm Clare Sutcliffe and I've been building and leading communities for over 15 years. I'm fascinated by the concept of community-led growth, so I'm on a journey to meet the innovators who are building communities to grow their business. This episode of Bunch is sponsored by KOOS.io, a community reward and motivation tool to boost your company's growth. More information in the show notes. Hello and welcome to Bunch. Today on the pod we have Sarah Drinkwater, who is founder and solo GP at Common Magic, who invests in early stage startups. Hi Sarah.
Thank you. Great to be here, Claire.
Cool. So we're going to kick off with some first questions, which is community is quite a vague sort of term. What does it mean to you?
Oh, I kind of hate answering this question. Probably I should have a better line for it. I guess there's two levels of community, right? There's the communities that we're born into and part of naturally, right? The identities we have, the beliefs we hold, the interests that we have, that's one level. But I guess because I work in technology, and particularly because I work in early stage technology companies, community there tends to mean utility plus belonging. This product serves a need that I have. It performs a function for me. And the group around the product and the product itself serves some part of my identity, some need I have, helps me build status. I can make money on this platform. So I guess at heart, community and technology is ecosystems around products and the building of them.
That's beautifully described. Very succinct. We should record that. Do you want to tell us a bit more about Common Magic and the kind of companies that you invest in? Because this relates to my next question about why.
Yeah, I've been an operator with a specialism in community building of all sorts for the last 15 years in kind of early stage technology in Europe generally. And when I began angel investing a couple of years ago, after I wrote the first check, I was always like, okay, why would a founder pick me? What can I do that others can't? Like, how can I uniquely help the founder kind of be successful? And I came back to kind of community strategy. You know, for me, that's everything from building alignment inside your company to communicating what you do and designing the building blocks that find users and bring users to your product and connect them to each other, like finding feedback, etc. Repeatable, scalable ways of finding feedback and enabling your audience to grow. And so after at least 35 checks as an angel, I was completely in love with working with early stage founders. It was just, it's always been a joy of mine to help other people unlock what they do and help them do more of it. And I kept, particularly in Europe, looking around and seeing a couple of trends coalescing at the same time. You know, there were multiple companies in Europe that had got big leveraging community in some way or another. You know, from Unity to Miro to Hugging Face, there were distinct companies that had leveraged community to get big. There were a real lack of angels. I think you and I are, if I think about angels that do something in the community space, you're one of the first people I email. Of course, you have like developer tools, and there's a broader conversation to be had around how big I think the community field is. I think it's a lot bigger, and there's a challenge around language, and that we talk about the same thing using different words. And at the same time, in Europe, there was a space for a small, angel type fund investing 100K to kind of 250K checks into the earlier stage rounds of a company, pre-seed and seed, where on the cap table, I'm operationally useful as a thought partner in helping founders build community. What does that mean? It tends to mean I meet companies that either are super early stage, but they have some signals of customer love or community already. It could be a meetup or a WhatsApp group or a GitHub and a couple of stars. It tends to be very early. Or it could be a company where they know community is going to be a really powerful lever for them, but outside of their peer group, because nearly always the founders I work with are serving themselves, outside their peer group, they're not really sure how to get to the next stage. And so the idea of the fund is that you have your lead investor at the earliest stage, and then you have space for kind of angels and micro funds. And my little micro fund takes that slice where it's like, okay, 100K check to help you do this one thing.
Okay, perfect. So when companies have community at their core, I'm guessing that's really beyond like your initial WhatsApp group of people who are kind of interested in what you're doing, but it's like absolutely essential to the product. Is that right?
Yeah, the way that I tend to think about it is I have a really strong belief in kind of bottom-up go-to-market in building something, co-designing something with a really specific early user group, with kind of really working to serve one group first and then expanding who you sell to, like kind of going up the stack in that way. personally kind of really resonate with that. And the way that I think about the companies that I like to invest in is their success is inextricably tied to the success of their community. If the community is inauthentic and falls over tomorrow, that has meaningful impact on the company's ability to be successful and make revenue. I think often when you say the word community, people immediately jump to kind of impact or consumer social. And that's really interesting to me. Obviously, I invest in companies that are net positive for the world. That just feels like a logical thing to do in 2023. But I don't really do a lot of consumer, and I don't really invest a lot in consumer social because it's so hard. Not just hard to raise in terms of the European landscape, but also really hard to do well. And so many of the investments I've made in the last couple of years that I've most liked working on have been kind of future of work, developer tools, very much like working products that are building for a very particular group, whether developers, designers, PMs in a couple of my companies' cases, just because that's a very particular archetype of there's a very clear reason why that group are talking to each other in between companies in that interstitial layer. You're a PM in this company, a PM in that company. There's a reason for you to talk. And there is some existing backbone of events and gathering places online where people get together, and offline too, which I think is more important. But I guess my acid test with companies always is, how is the founder thinking about product feedback? How is the founder thinking about the first version of the product? You tend to, founders that want to build something beautiful in a locked room and then release it top down don't tend to be the kind of founders that I love working with.
And so when I think about communities and how they help the people who are using products, because I'm also thinking about community in the same sense of ecosystems around generally technology products, although sometimes others. But one of the purest forms of it is the two-sided marketplace, where you have two communities that you need to serve at the same time to help be successful in the one play.
Yeah, I mean, that's the oldest form of human interaction, right? Is the market. Like, this thing, laws, norms, markets, the market, the place where trade happens. But there are so many ways of thinking about that. Like you look at like a Stripe Atlas, and on one side you have like all these really early stage startups seeking the operational backbone of what they do. You have Stripe Atlas as one core tool, but then you also have the other service providers right behind that. And Atlas really acts as a convening point that brings together, okay, here are what we think are the best tools. There are so many kinds of marketplace, right? Sometimes what you're buying is access to each other.
Yeah, is the connection, which is, I think, the kind of the purest form of community in a way, is the connection between two people or two groups of people.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like why do certain companies succeed and others don't? There's something ineffable about, we talk about vibes like it's a bad thing. By vibes, I mean everything from the brand, the feel, tone, the people that love it, the people that hold it up, the kind of folks they can hire. There are just certain companies that have this vibe around them that makes them unbeatable. It's not just
it makes them like the place to go, and also very trustworthy.
Yeah, I think
vibes are so important. I completely agree.
vibes are so important. And I think vibes are very underrated. I think it's really interesting to me how we rebrand. If you think about the shift from community to developer advocacy, there are certain audiences that need certain kind of credentials, right? And there's a whole lot to unpack there and what that means, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I love B2B companies that have the taste and the style of a B2C company. Whether it's the branding, the look and feel of the product. I think we forget all the time that folks inside companies are still people. They still like beautiful things. And as much of that is about how you attract the first group you get around your product often really sets the tone. Like the earliest community members, the earliest power users. To me, that's why I love my stage and I love what I do, is that I get to be really, one of my companies just had their very first meetup last week. It was 14 people, 14 scientists. That's so exciting to me, that stage of company building, that stage of like getting the first group together in real life. And all these people generously giving their evenings to give feedback on this thing they're building. Very beautiful, I think.
Yeah. So why do you think like now is the time that people are starting to pay more attention to the idea of building through your community? Why not like 20 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think we forget 20 years ago, communities were massive on the internet, right? Like I was a very big IRCer in the 1990s. And so I think, the story of the internet, and I'm going to bodge this section because there's too much I want to say. You could argue that the story of the internet is a story of like the 80s free software movement and the 90s forums swinging all the way over to corporate capture and kind of Web 2 dominance and certain massive companies being gatekeeping of the internet. I guess in simple terms, I would say advertising works for certain companies, but really doesn't for others. A lot of the growth hacking trends of the 2010s, I look back on and I think, God, that was silly. Of course, you can't spend thousands and thousands of pounds a day on Facebook and find new users that are going to stay, they're going to bounce. I think there is a lot more focus, especially post COVID, on finding your people online and offline. I think we've all seen the stats around like the rise of the loneliness economy, etc. But I think also, for companies that really want to be resilient at this moment in time in the economy, it really is about understanding who you're building for, and being truly open-minded to their feedback and being truly open to kind of understanding, like kind of seeing where things go. I guess it's that tension between, we've seen this in crypto, the tension between centralization and decentralization. Like, I in general believe decentralized systems are more resilient, but at the same time, early on, you need like a centralized team to kind of push forwards and steward the thing. I guess, I think for you and I, who've both been working in this space that was pretty frontier back in the 2000s when we first met, I guess it's just a matter of the world catching up. I think to me, what's important is I think, groups have always had influence, and groups have always done what individuals can't. That's the reason that humans lived in villages and not alone in caves, because we die in caves. But I think the job we have to do now is to not be thinking of this as some kind of flighty trend. It really is just a particular group of people like to be with each other, like to move in tandem. I'm not saying that every single product can and should launch like this. I'm just saying that for certain ones, this is the killer feature, that I think they can get right, and I want to help them do so.
Yeah, totally. What do you think about the idea that people are less trusting of messages directly from companies and want to hear from the people who use them or interact with them, and are more likely to trust what they say rather than the companies themselves?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of logical that a peer recommendation counts more than an advert, right? If you think about how you and I behave, of course, if my friend tells me, I love this new calendar product, you should try it, I'm so much more likely to try it than if I get advertised it somewhere. Like, that's just logical. But I do think at the same time, we're living in this era of distrust. I think we know this. I think things tend to move at the speed of trust. There is so much distrust in massive companies, so much distrust in media. I actually think trust is one of the most important factors that early stage companies overlook. There's this great quote that either Mark Andreessen or Paul Graham said. Somebody asked, "What is early stage investing?" And they replied, "It's a bridge loan of credibility." And I really believe in that. Like, if you think about, of course, the capital matters, but at the same time, what is happening at the stage of investment is, particularly at my stage, a person is putting a stake in the ground and saying, "I believe in you, and I think you can do this." And anyone who's interacted with an early stage product, a lot of that is about building on trust. You're using something that often is not great yet, but you believe in the ultimate mission, you believe in where this product is going, and you believe in the people behind it. So very early on, the stage that I work with companies at, they normally have less than 5 employees. There's normally, if you're a member of that community, you're going to know all the team. I think the challenge tends to come when things start to scale. When you tend to hire your first lead who's not the founder, when you start bringing in a much wider group outside the natural network of the company. Again, that's when you need to be thinking about architecture, metrics, how to handle conflict, how to handle churn, because naturally people are going to leave. That's human nature. You can't, communities are not consistent. They are living and breathing organisms, and that's why they're so fun.
Yeah, totally. How do you think companies can best handle that change in a community leadership? Maybe for that first one, from like founder to a sole community manager, how can they handle that in a way that doesn't like disintegrate the relationship between the member and the company?
Yeah, I think so much of this is about good communication. Like, I think, nearly every great transition that I've seen has been when the incoming lead has been hired from the community. Like, that's the obvious thing to do, is hire somebody everybody knows. And then it's like, oh, it's Jenny. Oh yeah, Jenny was at the last meetup. I think the first thing is hire well, like hire a person that has deep passion for the product already. They don't have to be in the existing community, but they need to have a deep passion for this exact space. Um, and then I think particularly as CEOs get busier, this can often be quite a painful transition as they're handing over something that's really meaningful to them. So you just have to work out, how do you communicate that? When does the CEO, when does she or he still show up and take part? And kind of who owns what. And I also think, the transition from having one core community member to a community member and then a couple of ambassadors that are in the community that are incentivized in a variety of ways. There are all of these inflection points for communities that tend to be when things break. But to be honest, the story of every community is a story of argument, disagreement, churn, evolution, change. That again, that's groups of people. So I think something that I often see as a big inflection point in my companies is when they have their first big bust up. The company does something that the community hates. There's a transition in people. There's the first time they have to exit somebody from the community. That's often quite a big flashpoint. No great community didn't get there without kicking out God knows how many people on the way. But like the first time you have to do it, it can be a bit unusual. Often it comes back to talking about like, what do we want here? What's the point of this, etc.? How do we handle it? Often what you're doing is building the muscle of handling further disagreement later down the line. So to me, this is all beneficial. I think unless, nearly always the companies I work with have a C-level member who's deeply bought into this work, nearly always it's the CEO or the CTO. Where I've seen companies struggle is when, the community team is thriving, an exec person moves on, that the CEO moves out of the company and the community was really important to them. And the exec team without that person is like, is this really important? Let's cut down the investment in it. And then the community feels weird, disconnected. I think you look at companies like Glossier who have done a great job, but also have gone through a lot of evolutions with their community. And I think a lot of that comes back to communication standards. Like how open can you be with your people about what's happening and why? And when there's a lot of uncertainty, people can sense it. Whether you tell them or not, they can sense when stuff is going down in the back room.
Yeah. And it sort of erodes trust, doesn't it? Because they're like, I don't know what's going on here. This community is a big part of my life and it feels unstable.
Yeah, we've seen so much of that in the DAO world in the last couple of years. I'm a very big DAO believer still. And I just think the first wave were ways of practicing being in a DAO. And, last year I was part of several that kind of folded or in the worst case kind of petered out. And that was really sad. But it was partly a function of when you have split leadership, there was a lack of ownership of certain areas. People weren't certain. There were certain voices pulled everything in a certain way. It was kind of a masterclass in group behavior for me. I was like, oh, so much to learn here.
Yeah, we were talking just before we pressed record that some people really handle ambiguity and uncertainty well. And I guess those types of communities are good for those types of people and not good for people who do not thrive in that environment, right?
Yeah, and I'm a high ambiguity person, so that's also why I like startups. So I don't think anyone who likes early stage is not. I think in general people who like the pre-seed seed stage tend to be quite comfortable with ambiguity. But I think to your point, the most successful thriving communities may have, there may be a core thing the group has in common. They are designers or they're Jewish or they like baseball or whatever it is they have in common. They have this thing. And then within that, you get many, 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 many personalities and archetypes. And part of the job of the team with the product is to manage that really, is to, you never own a community, you just influence it, but you're thinking about, okay, what product feedback is most useful to us versus least useful? That's also quite a hard thing to communicate. Oh, you've given this feedback 4 times, but you're not going to pay us the same as this customer. And so we have to listen to this person more right now. Oh, you don't think we should do this? Sorry, we're going to do it anyhow. I think all of this is practice. All of this is the inevitable. You look at the Unity bust up in the last 2 weeks. Like whenever you get these flashpoints in communities big and small, there's a lot of learnings to be had all round. The community members get a stronger picture of the founding team and what they care about or the pressure they're getting. from shareholders, board members, etc. The markets, the invisible market, always the invisible hand of the market pushing companies in a certain direction.
And so thinking about what markets want, which is generally speaking more profit, how do you see companies how do you see companies like incentivizing their community members to behave in a way that's like beneficial for the community that they are facilitating to exist?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what markets want is more trade, right? That is the whole sign of a good market is things happen, people are exchanging stuff. If I think about incentivizing good behavior at scale, what you want with a successful large product with community at its core is members are retained, so churn is lower. You've got more customers coming in based on recommendations from existing customers, and people aren't behaving like people aren't behaving badly in the product, which ultimately affects the first two metrics. I think in that case, it's all about signaling behavior. Again, holding up people in the community that are behaving in the way that you kind of hope others do, and rewarding them for it. And I don't mean like giving them money. I think communities are powered by recognition and gratitude. They're powered by people building status within your space, whatever space it is. So the more that you're able to celebrate those that are building things in your ecosystem that you think are cool, the more that you're able to enable them to be seen as leaders, to hold them up, to share their wins. I think that's how you again, if we look at really massive examples like Figma, that's how they won, right? Is they were the home for designers. But it turns out there's a lot of designers, and it turns out designers love status and reputation. They want to build their name on this particular product, and they did.
Yeah, similar to Notion.
Yeah, Notion, GitHub, Rome Research. There are so many Linear, so many Miro, so many interesting playbooks in this space of multiplayer software of different types. Not enough European examples, I would say. We need more there.
So I'd love to hear about some of the companies that you've invested in through Common Magic or maybe just before.
I'm really sorry. All of my first 3 fund investments are in stealth mode still, so I can't talk about them.
No. Okay. Can I ask about ones pre Common Magic?
Some of those are in stealth mode too, but yes.
Okay. So can I ask you about some companies that you have invested in that have community at their core that aren't in stealth mode, that you can tell us about why you invested in them and what's so great about them?
I mean, I have 3 fund investments, but they're all in stealth mode, and a bunch of my angel investments are too. If you don't have a reason to announce a raise, why would you announce a raise? I guess I'll just pick up a couple of companies that I'm doing a lot of work with right now. One's called Odin. It's basically community plus discovery plus utility for collective angel investing. Kind of an obvious one, but I got into angel investing through small checks. I'm really passionate about it. Every pound you spend is a vote for the world you want to see. Incredible founding team. Back to the pre-seed, and they've been on a massive tear ever since. They just did their seed raise. It's going incredibly well. And I think in general, they've really had a strong positive impact on syndicates and small scale investors in the UK and beyond. That's kind of cool. The Lowdown, I'm doing a lot with them right now. They're an amazing, I never thought I would invest in a review platform, having worked on them twice. I told the founder this when I first met her, but then I fell in love with her. The Lowdown is basically TripAdvisor for vaginas. In the average medical degree, you're spending one afternoon looking at contraception. Crazy. So many women are using products that don't work for them. So the Lowdown is basically a place for women to go and review what they're using, and then buy what works better for them. And what's amazing about this product is, not only are they generating significant revenue, but people are really showing up for each other. So many of the women that are coming to the site have been using products for 15 years that don't work for them, that cause them pain. And so that to me is just an incredibly feel-good story. And I think a couple of the other companies that I'm most excited by, Progression, Bounty, these really powerful kind of peer-to-peer tools, focused on future of work that are around better management. I love being a solo GP and working entirely on my own, but I actually used to love managing people. It was something I really prided myself on, of being a good manager and being a good coach. And so I particularly like products in that space around thinking about, good work alignment. I kind of love that area. Really sadly, a couple of companies and areas that I'm most excited by right now are all in stealth mode, so I can't talk about them, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, we'll have you back next year when hopefully they're out and causing a ruckus in the world in a good way. Before all of this, you were running communities at various different places at Wonderman, Quaip, and at Google Campus, probably most famously. I'm really interested to hear like what the differences were in those different communities, in their purpose, in their feel, their vibe. Like, what was that like moving from those different communities to each other?
Yeah, I guess, I started getting paid to run communities in about 2009, but I've been doing it for free for like 20 years before that. So I guess, if you think about what communities are, it's really about bringing people together, like creating structure to bring folks together. And I've worked at quite large scale and I've worked at small scale. I've built consumer communities and business communities and advised on developer communities at Protocol Labs and Filecoin. I guess every different company has a different vibe. You bring your vibe and then they bring theirs. But there are always shared challenges. I think in the, there's always the challenge of getting to scale. Certainly at Google, on the Google Maps team, I found that, when I was working on the Google Maps social layer called Local Guides, I started and it was just me. Very few reviews, very empty product, like a bet the engineering team was taking. And then a year later, there was a team of 12, year after that, team of 30, year after that, team of 50, exponential growth in terms of reviews. And I think the biggest challenge we had, we went city by city and basically built groups of early adopters in like London, New York, San Francisco, Tokyo, Berlin. As someone who loves cities and who's quite fascinated by like the new, this was an amazing job. But the core challenge we had there was around scale, not just in terms of building moderation tools that worked, which was such a masterclass in, it was so fun and educational working alongside a technical team in that case, because my team was surfacing everything that was broken and then collectively we're working out how to fix it. I think you often and always have the scale challenges. I think you always and often have the people challenges. With Campus, that was again really close to my heart, running a physical space for entrepreneurs that attracted entrepreneurs, investors, policymakers, corporates. If you came to London, if you were interested in early stage tech in that era, you often would come to Campus.
We started Code Club from Google
Yes.
Campus. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of crazy, like how often in the next close of my fund, I've got two entrepreneurs coming in who I first met at Campus when they were first starting their companies, and their companies are now quite big and quite well known. And that makes me really proud. That company, that building closed in 2021, so it's pretty obsolete now. But I think the challenges of physical space are, if you can only run 20 events a week, what do you choose? We always had a surfeit of stuff that we were, the flow of applications we got was insane. There were people that we had to ban, not many, I think 5 or 6 in my entire time there, like 4 years. But in each case, it was pretty contentious. Many threatenings of being sued, many followings home after work. I think, yeah, if you get a community that big, you're always going to get a couple of folks like that. And I think at the same time, the challenge of trying to build something that was truly for the ecosystem, that was funded by a large corporate, I think you can't be naive about the fact that Google, even in 2018, 2014, was a big corporate. And so I think when you're telling people this building is a gift for the community and we're not taking equity in your companies and we're not stealing IP, the obvious question is, what's the catch? And I'm really proud of the fact that we were able to build a space that genuinely was for the community. And of course, I had to do loads of press and policy work to make that, to build a reputation and make the case to Google that it was worth the money. But it was kind of something that was always really hard in that community, because we'd always get this suspicion that we were doing something shady behind everyone's backs. And we genuinely weren't. But I think, when I left in 2018, I went to work on responsible technology full time because of what I'd observed in the previous kind of 18 months. Post-Trump, post-Brexit, so much distrust. The word of the year in 2017 was techlash. And at the same time, a lot of techlash was coming from media academics. There wasn't really a voice at early stage. And so part of the reason I left to go and work on that full time was I was like, wow, I love common standards. I think groups can do things individuals can't. So to me, that's why I went and worked on that full time, was, okay, how do we build communities of early stage technologists that really care about this too? I've had a whole set of different challenges there, of course, like massive problem space. Responsible to what and for whom is the obvious thing to ask, right?
Yes. I want to ask if it's possible for businesses to add community long after they've launched. because I feel like there are lots of startups who are like, community-led growth sounds like a thing I should do and I could gain a lot from. Is it possible for me to start it now, or have I just missed the boat?
I mean, I don't think it depends on, it's so dependent on the company. There's no one answer to that. I've seen a couple of companies where they get to like seed or series A and they realize their strongest recommendation mechanism is their existing users. So they end up being like, oh, we should provide a space for them to get together. That can work. I think it's just about, to me, it always comes back to, is it broadcast? Is it about you telling people about what you're doing? Or is it actually about providing space for folks to genuinely get together? That's kind of the acid test and whether something works or not. If it's purely a sales channel, it's probably going to be a bit less effective in lots of ways. It's not impossible, but it really depends on the purpose. Sorry, my son is screaming in the background. He's just got home from school.
Oh, just come home. Lovely. Let you get to him. So Sarah, if people want to get in contact with you and talk about Common Magic and your plans for the future, how should they do that?
Yeah, email me. My email is sarah@commonmagic.xyz. DM me on Twitter, message me on LinkedIn, like very easy to get hold of. And I have a contact form on my website, which is commonmagic.xyz.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thanks for joining us. That was very interesting. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, give us a nice juicy rating so more people can find us. And if you haven't already, then subscribe to Bunch wherever you get your podcasts. See you next week.